Have you ever caught him looking at you across the room in that quiet way, like he's still trying to figure you out even after all this time? And have you ever wondered why some women keep a man completely captivated for years, sometimes decades, while other women can do everything right and still watch a man slowly drift away? If you've ever asked yourself, what is it that makes a man stay obsessed with one woman for life, then stay with me for the next few minutes, because I'm going to tell you something that almost nobody talks about. It's not about being the prettiest woman in the room. It's not about being the most agreeable, the most available, or the easiest to love. It's something else entirely. Something that most women never learn, and most men can't even explain because they don't fully understand it themselves. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly what keeps a man hooked for life. And more importantly, you'll know how to become that woman starting today. I want you to think about someone you know. Maybe it's a couple you've watched for years, a mother and father, an aunt and uncle, two people who have been together since before you can remember. And even now, even after the wrinkles and the arguments and the mortgage payments, you can still see it in his eyes when he looks at her. That spark never left. And I want you to compare that to the version of love you've probably experienced yourself or watched a friend experience. The kind where things start out electric, intoxicating, obsessive almost, and then slowly, month by month, that fire turns into ash. He still loves you, maybe. He still comes home. But something in his eyes has gone quiet. He's not looking at you the way he used to look at you. And that quiet distance, that's the thing that keeps so many women up at night. Maybe you've started checking his phone, not because you're a jealous person, but because the distance has made you desperate for any clue about what's going on in his head. Maybe you've started rehearsing conversations in the shower, trying to figure out the perfect way to ask him if he still finds you attractive, without sounding needy, without sounding insecure, without giving him another reason to pull away. Maybe you've looked at old photos from the beginning of your relationship, the ones where he's looking at you like you're the only person in the room, and felt a strange grief, like you're mourning someone who is still very much alive and still sleeping right next to you every night. That specific kind of loneliness, the loneliness of being physically close to someone while feeling emotionally miles away from them, is one of the most painful experiences a woman can go through. And almost nobody talks about how common it actually is. Because here's the truth that nobody wants to say out loud. Most women have been taught the wrong lessons about how to keep a man. We've been told to be agreeable. We've been told to give him space, to never nag, to always look good, to cook well, to be endlessly patient, to never make him feel pressured. And all of that might make a man comfortable, but comfort is not what keeps a man obsessed. Comfort is actually the very thing that quietly kills desire. Let me say that again because it's the single most important sentence in this entire video. Comfort is not what keeps a man obsessed. In fact, too much comfort, too much predictability, too much of you shrinking yourself down to keep the peace is exactly what makes a man stop chasing. And if you've ever felt like the man in your life used to fight for your attention, used to text first, used to plan the dates, used to look at you like you were a mystery he needed to solve, and now he doesn't do any of that anymore, I promise you, it's not because he stopped loving you. It's because somewhere along the way, you both stopped being mysteries to each other. And a man's heart, whether he admits it or not, is wired to chase what feels alive, not what feels finished. I know this might sting a little, I know some of you are thinking about your own relationship right now, replaying the last few months in your head, wondering where things changed. Maybe you've noticed that he used to initiate conversations and now you're the one always reaching out first. Maybe you've noticed that compliments have become rare, that the way he touches you has changed, that there's a politeness between you now instead of passion. Maybe you've cried in the bathroom after an argument, wondering what's wrong with you, wondering if you're simply not enough anymore. And if that's you, I want you to know something important before we go any further. This isn't about you being broken. This isn't about you failing as a partner. This is about a pattern, a psychological pattern that almost every relationship falls into if nobody understands how to interrupt it. Here's what's actually happening. In the beginning of almost every relationship, there is uncertainty. You don't know if he likes you back. He doesn't know if you're interested. There's a gap, an emotional distance, and that distance creates tension, and tension creates chemistry. Your brain and his brain are both flooded with dopamine, the chemical of pursuit, the chemical of wanting. But dopamine isn't triggered by having something. It's triggered by the possibility of getting something you don't yet have. This is why the chase feels so intoxicating, and why the moment things become fully secure, fully predictable, fully certain, that dopamine slowly fades. Not because love fades, because certainty removes the chemical fuel that desire runs on. Now here is the big reframe. The thing that changes everything once you truly understand it. The goal was never to eliminate uncertainty completely. The goal is to become a woman who remains subtly, endlessly fascinating, even after he has fully committed to you. In other words, the secret that keeps a man hooked for life is not perfect predictability. It is what I call emotional depth with layers, meaning you give him security in your love, but you never give him total certainty about all of you. You remain a woman with her own world, her own mind, her own evolving self, so that even after 10 years, 20 years, there is still something new to discover. This might feel counterintuitive at first, because we've all been raised on the idea that stability is the ultimate goal of love, that once you reach a certain level of comfort and security, you've made it, you've won. And to be clear, stability absolutely matters. Nobody wants a relationship built on chaos or constant anxiety, but there's a difference between a stable foundation and a stagnant one. A stable foundation is like the roots of a tree, deep, unshakable, something you can always return to. A stagnant relationship is like a tree that stopped growing branches years ago. It's still standing, technically alive, but nothing new is happening above the ground. And what keeps a man's heart racing isn't the roots. It's watching the branches keep reaching towards something new. Think about it like an iceberg. Most relationships start with two people showing each other the tip of the iceberg, the surface level personality, the good manners, the best version of themselves. And as the relationship progresses, most women make the mistake of slowly revealing everything all at once. Every insecurity, every fear, every need, until there's nothing left beneath the surface. And once a man feels like he has seen the entire iceberg, mapped the entire ocean floor of who you are, curiosity dies, because there's nothing left to explore. But the women who keep men obsessed for life, they understand something different. They let him see enough to fall in love with the depth, but they always keep growing, keep evolving, keep adding new layers to that iceberg. So there is always more beneath the surface, no matter how many years pass. I remember reading about a woman named Elena, married for almost 30 years. And when someone asked her husband what kept the spark alive after all this time, he said something that stuck with me forever. He said, "She still surprises me. She'll come home talking about a book that changed how she sees the world, or she'll suddenly want to learn something new, Or she'll say something in an argument that makes me realize I still don't fully understand her. And honestly, that's the most exciting thing about being married to her. That's not luck. That's not chemistry that happened by accident. That's a woman who understood, whether consciously or instinctively, that a man doesn't stay obsessed with a woman he has fully figured out. He stays obsessed with a woman who keeps giving him reasons to keep discovering her. This brings us to the first major lesson. And I want you to really absorb this one because it will change how you see your entire relationship. Lesson number 1 is this: never let your identity dissolve into his. So many women, especially once a relationship becomes serious, start slowly abandoning their own friendships, their own hobbies, their own ambitions in order to build their entire world around him. It feels loving in the moment. It feels like devotion. But from a man's perspective, watching a woman who once had fire, passion, and her own dreams slowly turn into someone whose entire identity revolves around him, it doesn't feel like love. It feels like pressure. It feels like responsibility. And worst of all, it removes the very independence that made him fall for you in the first place. Think of it like a garden. In the beginning, he was attracted to a garden full of different flowers, different colors, different textures, a whole ecosystem of life. But slowly, some women uproot every flower except the one labeled him, until the entire garden is just one single plant, completely dependent on his attention to survive. And here's the tragic irony. The very devotion meant to keep him close is often what quietly pushes him away. Because a man doesn't want to be someone's entire world. He wants to be an important part of a woman's beautifully full world. The problem isn't that you love him too much. The problem is that you forgot how to love yourself with the same intensity. I once heard about a woman named Priyanka who 3 years into her marriage realized she hadn't touched a paintbrush since her wedding day, even though painting used to be the thing that made her feel most alive before she met her husband. She started painting again, just an hour on Saturday mornings. Nothing dramatic, no big announcement, and within a few months, her husband started asking to see what she was working on. He started coming home and talking about her art with his co-workers. Something that seemed small to her had become, in his eyes, one of the most attractive things about her, because it reminded him that she was a whole, thriving person, not simply an extension of their shared life. That's the quiet power of reclaiming even one small piece of your own identity. So here is your first actionable step. This week, I want you to reconnect with one thing that used to be entirely yours before the relationship began. A friendship you let fade, a hobby you dropped, a goal you postponed, not to punish him, not to create distance out of anger, but because a woman who has her own thriving inner world becomes magnetic again. When you walk back into the room, lit up by something that has nothing to do with him, that same iceberg effect happens. He sees a new layer of you, and new layers create curiosity. And curiosity is the very fuel that desire depends on. Now let's talk about the second major lesson, and this one might be the hardest one to hear, but I promise you it's one of the most powerful. Lesson number 2 is this: emotional safety and emotional excitement are not opposites, but most women only build one of them. Some women build incredible emotional safety, meaning he knows you'll never leave, you'll never cause drama, you'll always be there no matter what. This is beautiful, and it matters deeply. But if that safety comes at the cost of ever challenging him, ever having your own opinions, ever disagreeing, ever surprising him with your boundaries, that safety turns into something closer to a well-worn armchair. Comfortable, yes, but nobody feels their heart race sitting in an old armchair. On the other hand, some women build only excitement, unpredictability, drama, jealousy games, emotional highs and lows. And while that can feel intense, it burns a relationship out fast because a nervous system can only handle so much anxiety before it starts associating you with exhaustion instead of love. The secret is combining both. He needs to know at the deepest level that your love is stable and unwavering. And at the same time, he needs to feel that you are still your own person, capable of surprising him, capable of disagreeing with him, capable of walking away from disrespect, capable of living a full life with or without him. This combination, safety plus unpredictability, is what creates what psychologists sometimes call secure attachment with an edge of desire. And it is incredibly rare, which is exactly why it's so powerful. Let me give you an analogy that might make this click. Think of a mountain climber. Nobody feels a thrill climbing a flat sidewalk because there's no risk, no challenge, nothing to conquer. But nobody wants to climb a mountain with no ropes either, because that's terrifying, not exciting. The mountains people remember climbing for the rest of their lives are the ones with just enough safety equipment to trust the process and just enough real challenge to feel the exhilaration of the climb. Your relationship needs to feel like that mountain, secure enough that he trusts you completely, challenging enough that being with you still feels like something worth climbing for. Here's a quote I want you to remember from this section. A man doesn't fall out of love with a woman who challenges him. He falls out of love with a woman who stops feeling like a person and starts feeling like a routine. Now let's move to lesson number 3. And this one is about communication. Specifically, the difference between reactive communication and expressive communication. So many relationships slowly die, not because people stop caring, but because they stop expressing themselves honestly, and instead only communicate in reaction to problems. Meaning, the only time real conversations happen is during arguments, during moments of hurt, during moments of frustration. And over time, a man starts to unconsciously associate deep conversation with conflict, so he avoids it altogether, choosing silence instead of risking another difficult talk. This is why so many long-term couples describe feeling like roommates instead of romantic partners. Not because the love disappeared, but because emotional expression became something dangerous instead of something safe and natural. The women who keep men hooked for life understand that emotional expression should happen constantly, in small moments, not just during crisis moments. Telling him what excites you about your day, telling him a random thought you had, telling him something you're proud of, something you're scared of, something you're dreaming about. This constant emotional sharing keeps the relationship feeling alive because it treats the relationship like an ongoing story instead of a project that's already finished. Think of it like a campfire. A campfire doesn't stay lit because you throw one giant log on it once a year during an argument. It stays lit because you keep feeding it small pieces of wood consistently, keeping the flame alive through steady, gentle attention. I remember hearing about a couple, Daniel and Sophia, married for over 15 years. And Sophia said something in an interview that perfectly captures this lesson. She said, "I make sure he knows my inner world every single day, even the small stuff. I think that's why after 15 years, he still asks me what I'm thinking. Most people stop asking that question after year 2. That's the difference between a relationship that slowly fades into silence and a relationship that stays emotionally alive for decades. Now, lesson number 4, and this one is deeply important. especially in a world where so many women have been taught to prioritize being agreeable over being authentic. Lesson number 4 is this: a man's respect is built far more by your boundaries than by your accommodation. This might be uncomfortable to hear, but I need you to really sit with this truth. Many women believe that constantly bending, constantly accommodating, constantly saying yes, even when they mean no, is what keeps a man happy and committed. But in reality, a man's nervous system reads constant accommodation as a lack of self-respect. And paradoxically, the less you respect your own boundaries, the less he unconsciously respects you, even if he loves you deeply. Boundaries are not about punishment. They're not about ultimatums or threats. A boundary simply says, I love you, and I also love myself enough to protect my peace, my values, and my standards. Women who maintain their boundaries, who are willing to say, that behavior isn't okay with me, or I need space right now, or I won't accept being spoken to that way, are not pushing men away. They're actually building something far more powerful than temporary comfort. They're building long-term respect. Because deep down, every man wants a partner who has enough self-respect to walk away from mistreatment, because that same self-respect is exactly what makes her presence, her loyalty, and her love feel earned rather than assumed. Here's a quote worth remembering. The moment you stop abandoning yourself to keep him comfortable is the moment he starts choosing you with his whole heart, instead of simply staying out of habit. There's one more lesson I want to give you before we move into the practical steps, because I think it might be the most overlooked one of all. Lesson number 5 is this: men stay obsessed with women who give them a sense of shared purpose, not just shared comfort. In the beginning of a relationship, there's often an unspoken sense of building something together, a future, a story, a shared identity as a couple. But as years pass, many couples slowly lose that sense of forward motion. Life becomes about maintenance instead of growth, paying bills, managing schedules, coordinating logistics, surviving the week. And when a relationship becomes only about maintenance, something inside a man quietly starts to feel like the adventure is over, like the story has stopped being written. Women who keep men hooked for life understand how to keep injecting a sense of shared purpose into the relationship. Whether that's a shared dream you're both working toward, a tradition you've created together, or simply a habit of talking about the future with excitement instead of anxiety. It's the difference between a couple who only discusses what needs to get done this week and a couple who still talks about the life they're building, the places they want to see, the people they want to become. Think of it like two people rowing a boat. If all either of you ever talks about is bailing water out of the boat just to keep it afloat, rowing starts to feel like a burden. But if you're both still pointed toward a shore you're excited to reach together, even the hard rowing feels meaningful. I once read about a couple, Marcus and Priya, married for over 20 years, who made it a habit every New Year's to write down a shared dream for the year ahead, no matter how small. Sometimes a trip, sometimes a new hobby they'd learn together, sometimes just a promise to laugh more. Priya said that small ritual was the reason their marriage never felt stagnant, because every year they were still building something new together instead of simply repeating the year before. That's a small, deliberate act, but it carries enormous psychological weight because it keeps the relationship feeling like a living story instead of a finished chapter. The second step is practicing daily emotional expression instead of reactive communication. Share one small piece of your inner world with him every single day. A thought, a feeling, a dream, something completely unrelated to logistics or responsibilities. This keeps your emotional connection alive instead of allowing it to calcify into routine. The third step is identifying one boundary you've been avoiding and gently, calmly, without anger, communicating it this week. Not as an attack, but as an act of self-respect. Something as simple as saying, "I need you to speak to me calmly, even when we disagree." Or, "I need some time to myself this weekend to recharge." Small, consistent boundaries build enormous long-term respect. And the fourth step is embracing what I call intentional unpredictability. This doesn't mean playing games or creating fake drama. It means allowing yourself to be a full, complex, ever-growing human being. Someone who occasionally surprises him with a new opinion, a spontaneous idea, a new passion. Because predictability might create comfort, but growth creates fascination. And the fifth step is creating a small, shared ritual of forward motion. Something as simple as a monthly conversation where you both talk about a dream you're chasing, individually or together, or a tradition that reminds you both that this relationship is still an unfolding story rather than a settled arrangement. It doesn't need to be elaborate. It just needs to be consistent, because a relationship that keeps pointing towards something new keeps both people leaning in instead of leaning back. I also want to say something important here, because I don't want you walking away from this video thinking any of this is about performing for him or manipulating him into staying. None of these lessons work if they're done from a place of fear, trying to trick a man into loving you more. They only work when they come from a place of genuine self-respect, genuine curiosity about your own growth, and genuine desire to build a relationship that feels alive for both of you, not just for him. The moment you start doing any of this purely as a strategy to control his behavior, it stops working. Because on some level, people can always feel when something is performance instead of authenticity. The real secret isn't a set of tricks. It's becoming a woman who is so full of her own life, her own boundaries, and her own evolving story that staying obsessed with her simply becomes the natural, effortless result. You deserve a love that doesn't fade into quiet distance. You deserve a partner who looks at you the same way or even more intensely after 10 years than he did on your very first date. And that kind of love isn't luck. It isn't something only a few lucky women get to experience. It's built intentionally through the choices we've talked about today. I know some of you watching this are in relationships where you feel like you've already tried everything, where you're exhausted from carrying the emotional weight alone, wondering if any of this can actually make a difference at this stage. And I want to gently remind you that people are far more responsive to change than we often give them credit for. When you show up differently, more grounded in your own identity, more secure in your own boundaries, more alive in your own world, it shifts the entire emotional dynamic of the relationship, even if he never reads a single word of what we talked about today. You don't need him to change first. You only need to become the fullest, most alive version of yourself, and let that presence do the quiet work of reigniting what once felt so easy between you. So starting today, I want you to choose yourself again. Rebuild your own garden. Speak your own truth. Hold your own boundaries. Keep building towards something new, together and on your own, and watch how naturally the rest begins to fall into place. If this video resonated with you, if you felt like I was speaking directly to something you've been carrying quietly for a long time, please take a moment to like this video, because it genuinely helps this message reach more women who need to hear it. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.